The distance between a man and his maker is usually measured in years, but tonight in Harlem, it was measured in inches, 6 inches. That was the exact distance between the barrel of the 38th Special and the base of the skull of the most dangerous man in New York City. September 12, 1958. 1:14 a.m. Inside the Lenox Lounge on 125th Street, the Art Deco walls are vibrating with the bass of the house band, but in the back corner, the air is thick enough to choke on. It smells of stale beer, expensive lavender cologne, and the metallic tang of fear. Sitting in the booth is Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Look at him. He's wearing a gray Italian silk suit tailored to perfection. He's laughing at a joke, holding a crystal glass of whiskey. He looks like a king resting on his throne. He looks untouchable. But he isn't alone. Standing behind him is the man paid to protect his life, Big Sam. A man Bumpy treated like a brother, a man who ate at Bumpy's table and held Bumpy's children. But tonight, loyalty has a price tag, $50,000. That was the bounty the Genovese Crime Family put on Bumpy's head, and tonight, Big Sam is here to collect. Time seems to warp. The music slows down into a low, terrifying drone. Sam's right hand slides into his jacket. The movement is stiff, terrified. His palm is slick against the checkered wood grip of the revolver. The weight of the gun feels heavier than usual tonight. It feels like the weight of a coffin. He draws. It happens in the space between 2 heartbeats. The gun rises. The black steel barrel levels out. It hovers just inches from Bumpy's neck, right where the spine meets the brainstem. The kill spot. Bumpy stops laughing. He freezes. He doesn't turn around. He doesn't flinch. He just stares into his glass. Sam squeezes his eyes shut. His heart is hammering against his ribs like a bird trapped in a cage. He pulls the trigger back. The cylinder rotates. The hammer rears back, poised to strike the primer, poised to change the course of American history. He squeezes. That sound, that single, dry click, was louder than any bomb ever dropped. It was the sound of a destiny refusing to die. The gun didn't jam. The firing pin wasn't broken. So how does a professional hitman, hired by the most ruthless mob family in America, walk up to the king of Harlem and pull the trigger on an empty chamber? Did Bumpy Johnson have guardian angels? Or did he know something that no one else in the room knew? Before we reveal the twisted chess move that saved Bumpy's life and the bloodbath that followed, subscribe to the channel right now if you want the truth that the history books left out. And hit that like button if you respect the code of silence, because in the next 60 seconds, Big Sam is going to learn the hardest lesson of his life. You can't kill a king who has already written your ending. To understand the weight of that trigger pull, you have to understand the man sitting in the booth. You have to understand the kingdom he built and the ghosts he buried to build it. Harlem, New York, the 1950s. They called it the Black Mecca. To the outsider, it was a world of jazz, rhythm, and soul. It was the Apollo Theater on amateur night. It was the Savoy Ballroom where the Lindy Hoppers defied gravity. It was the scent of fried chicken and waffles drifting from Wells Restaurant at 3 a.m. But scratch the surface and you found a different city. Harlem was a city within a city, a concrete island surrounded by a sea of indifference. Segregation wasn't just a law in the South. Up here, it was an economic reality. The banks wouldn't lend. The city wouldn't fix the roads. The police, mostly white, mostly Irish, didn't patrol Harlem to protect it. They patrolled it to contain it. In this vacuum of power, the government didn't matter. The mayor of New York was a ghost. The only government that mattered was the numbers, the policy racket, the poor man's stock market. For a penny, a nickel, or a dime, you could bet on a 3-digit number. If you hit, you got paid 600 to 1. It was the heartbeat of the local economy. It paid the rent, it bought the groceries, it funded the churches, And the chairman of the board, the man who made the sun rise and set on 125th Street, was Ellsworth Raymond Johnson. They called him Bumpy. It was a deceptive name. It sounded soft, almost comical. It came from a knot on the back of his head, a deformity he'd carried since he was a boy in Charleston, South Carolina. But by 1958, nobody laughed at the name. When you whispered Bumpy in a barbershop, the razors stopped buzzing. He wasn't a brute. That was the mistake his enemies always made. They looked at his rap sheet, armed robbery, assault, grand larceny, and they saw a thug. But Bumpy was a scholar. He spent his years in solitary confinement at Alcatraz and Dannemora not doing push-ups, but reading history. He studied Napoleon. He memorized the Constitution. He played chess with the guards and beat them until they refused to play him anymore. He understood something the Italian mob bosses downtown never grasped. Power isn't about violence. Violence is what happens when you lose power. True power is influence. He was a paradox, a man who could quote philosophy in the morning and slit a throat in the afternoon. There's a famous story from 1954. A woman ran up to him on 116th Street, tears streaming down her face, clutching an eviction notice. She told him her boy was sick, and the landlord was putting them on the curb. Bumpy didn't even look at the paper. He just looked at her shaking hands. He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a roll of cash thick enough to choke a horse. He peeled off 5 bills and pressed them into her palm. He didn't ask for a thank you. He simply told her to pay the rent, get a doctor, and tell the landlord that if he ever knocked on her door again, he would have to collect the rent from Bumpy Johnson himself. The woman tried to kiss his hand, but Bumpy gently pulled away, tipped his hat, and kept moving. This was his armor. This was why the feds couldn't touch him. This was his armor. This was why the feds couldn't touch him. He paid tuitions. He delivered coal in the winter to freezing families. He gave out turkeys every Thanksgiving. To the FBI, he was a public enemy. To Harlem, he was Robin Hood with a switchblade. He had built a network of loyalty that no surveillance device could penetrate. If a stranger walked into Harlem and asked where Bumpy lived, by the time that stranger turned the corner, Bumpy already knew his shoe size. But don't mistake charity for weakness. Bumpy had clawed his way to the top through a river of blood. In the 1930s, he stood side by side with Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the Queen of Numbers, and went to war against Dutch Schultz. Dutch was a monster, a man who killed for sport. He wanted Harlem. He sent armies of hitmen uptown to take it. Bumpy sent them back in body bags. He invented the hit-and-run tactics of urban warfare. He used the rooftops. He used the sewers. He turned Harlem into a fortress that the white mobsters couldn't navigate. By 1958, he had forced the 5 families of the Italian Mafia to do the unthinkable: negotiate. The deal was simple. The Italians controlled the heroin supply coming in from Marseille, but they couldn't sell it in Harlem. They stood out. They didn't know the language of the streets. So, Bumpy became the buffer. Every kilo of heroin, every bottle of bootleg whiskey, every bet placed in Harlem, Bumpy took a cut. He was the toll booth operator on the bridge to the underworld. He was rich, he was respected, he was feared. But in the underworld, peace is just a pause between wars. The year 1958 brought a change in the wind. The heroin epidemic was turning from a business into a plague. The money was getting too big. And downtown, in the smoky social clubs of Little Italy, the new boss, Vito Genovese, looked at the map of New York City. He saw the millions of dollars flowing through 125th Street, and he asked a dangerous question. Why are we paying the eggplant? Bumpy Johnson was at the height of his power. But the higher you stand, the easier you are to target. The sharks were circling, and the closest shark was swimming right behind him. While Bumpy Johnson was playing chess in Harlem, a different game was being played in Little Italy, and the rules had just changed. For years, Bumpy dealt with Charles "Lucky" Luciano. Luciano was a businessman. He understood that a war with Harlem was bad for the bottom line. He respected Bumpy's intelligence, if not his skin color. But Luciano was gone, exiled to Italy. The new power in New York was Vito Genovese. Vito was a different breed of animal. He didn't care about diplomacy. He cared about submission. He was a man so feared that he once ordered a hit on his own wife because she talked too much. The friction point was heroin, the white lady. By 1958, the French Connection was flooding New York with pure heroin. The profit margins were astronomical. You could buy a kilo for $3,000 in Marseille and sell it for $30,000 on the streets of New York. But the Italians had a problem. They controlled the ports, but they couldn't control the corners. They needed Bumpy Johnson to distribute, and Bumpy charged a heavy tax. To Vito Genovese, this was unacceptable. He was a virulent racist who viewed black gangsters not as partners, but as property. He looked at the millions flowing into Harlem and asked a dangerous question. Why are we splitting the meal when we own the kitchen? The decision was made in the summer of 1958. Bumpy Johnson had to go. But Vito knew he couldn't send an Italian hit squad uptown. Bumpy's surveillance network was too good. A carload of white men in fedoras crossing 110th Street would be spotted before they even parked the car. They needed a Trojan horse. They needed someone Bumpy trusted. Enter Big Sam. Sam wasn't a monster. He was a tragedy. He was a soldier who had taken bullets for Bumpy in the 40s. But peace is boring for a soldier, and Sam filled the boredom with gambling. By August, Sam was in deep. He owed $20,000 to the wrong people. That's nearly $250,000 today. The debt wasn't held by Bumpy. It was held by Vincent Chin Gigante, the Genovese family's top enforcer. The Italians didn't threaten to break Sam's legs. They seduced him. They offered him $50,000 in the territory of 116th Street. All he had to do was pull a trigger. It was the oldest trick in the devil's playbook. They turned a man's loyalty into a liability. Sam took the envelope, and in that moment, he signed his own death warrant. But here's where the story turns. Bumpy Johnson didn't survive 3 decades of gang warfare by being blind. He felt the ease shift in the air. He noticed the police patrols had vanished from his block, a sure sign the cops had been told to look the other way. He noticed his Italian contacts were suddenly unavailable. And he noticed Sam. Sam was jumpy. He wouldn't look Bumpy in the eye. He started wearing a new gold watch that Bumpy knew he couldn't afford. 3 days before the hit, Bumpy tested him. "Sam," Bumpy said, buttering a roll, "I had a dream last night. I dreamt I was Caesar, and Brutus was standing right behind me with a knife." Sam dropped his fork. It clattered loudly on the plate. "That's a crazy dream, boss," Sam stammered. Bumpy just smiled, a cold reptilian smile. Was it? Bumpy knew. He didn't know when, he didn't know where. But he knew the snake was in the garden, and he decided he wasn't going to wait to get bit. He was going to defang it. August 1958. The month the city held its breath. If you walked into the Lenox Lounge that summer, the air felt different, heavier. The zebra room, with its black and white stripes, felt less like a VIP section and more like a cage. Bumpy Johnson sat in his booth, watching the room in the reflection of his glass. He was a student of the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius Seneca. He knew that the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing. You have to be ready for the sudden blow, and the blows were coming, not with fists, but with silence. The first sign was the silence. For 10 years, Bumpy's phone rang every morning at 9 a.m. It was his contact at the 28th Precinct, a lieutenant who took a fat envelope every month to tell Bumpy which raids were scheduled. On August 15th, the phone didn't ring. Bumpy didn't panic. He didn't call the station. He simply poured a cup of coffee and whispered to his wife, "Mamie, the wind has changed. The police had been bought. The Genovese family had paid double what Bumpy was paying. The shield of the law was gone. Paranoia is a slow poison. It makes you question everything. Was that car following us? Why did the bartender pour that drink with his left hand instead of his right? Why is the music so loud tonight?" But Bumpy didn't let the paranoia consume him. He used it. He sharpened it. He became a ghost in his own city. He started sleeping in different apartments. He changed his routine every day. He stopped eating food he didn't see prepared with his own eyes. He was isolating the variable. He knew the attack wouldn't come from the street. It would come from the inner circle. And then he saw it. The glitch in the matrix. It wasn't a confession. It was a watch. Big Sam had always worn a beat-up leather strap watch. He was a soldier, not a showman. But one Tuesday, Bumpy noticed a flash of gold on Sam's wrist. A solid gold Rolex Datejust, the kind of watch that cost a year's salary for a bodyguard. Bumpy didn't ask about it. He didn't compliment it. He just filed it away. In the cabinet of his mind labeled Betrayal. The tension in the car was thick enough to choke on. Sam was driving too fast. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He kept checking the rearview mirror, not for cops, but for something else. Bumpy decided to pull the thread. "Sam," Bumpy said softly, staring out at the rain, "do you believe in loyalty?" Sam flinched. The car swerved slightly into the next lane. "Course, boss," Sam said, his voice cracking just a fraction. "I'd take a bullet for you. You know that." Bumpy turned his head, slowly, like a turret. He looked at the gold watch on Sam's wrist. "I know you would, Sam," Bumpy said. "But would you give one?" The silence that followed lasted for 10 blocks. Sam didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was the confession. We are deep in the psychological warfare now. The trap is set, and the walls are closing in. I want to pause for a second. This story is long, dark, and heavy. What time is it where you are watching this from? Are you watching this late at night? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this deep dive, make sure you're subscribed. Bumpy knew Sam had turned. A lesser man would have killed Sam that night. He would have put him in a trunk and dumped him in the East River. But Bumpy Johnson wasn't playing checkers. He was playing 4D chess. If he killed Sam, the Genovese family would just buy another bodyguard, and another. Bumpy would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, wondering who's next. No. He needed to send a message that would ring louder than a gunshot. He needed to break their spirit. He came up with a plan so dangerous, so insane, that it has been whispered about for 60 years. He wasn't going to stop the assassination. He was going to let it happen. He was going to walk into the Lenox Lounge, sit in the kill seat, and let the traitor put a gun to his head. He was betting his life on one detail. He was betting that Sam was sloppy, that Sam was so consumed by guilt and greed that he wouldn't check his weapon. It was the ultimate gamble. Tails, you die. Heads, you become a legend. September 12th was approaching. The storm was here. September 12th, the day the bill came due. At 4 p.m., the phone rang in the booth on the corner of 118th Street. Sam picked it up on the first ring. "Tonight," the voice said. It was Chin Gigante. "The lounge. Do it before the band takes their second break, or don't bother coming home." Sam hung up. He stood in the booth for a long time. He looked at his hands. They were massive hands, capable of crushing a throat or holding a baby. Tonight, they were shaking like leaves. He checked his weapon, a .38 Special snub nose. He loaded 6 rounds of hollow-point ammunition. He spun the cylinder. It was heavy with death. He tucked it into his shoulder holster, right next to his heart. He was going to kill the man who made him. He told himself it was business. He told himself it was survival. But deep down, he knew it was suicide of the soul. 11 Sacre p.m. The Lenox Lounge was packed. Bumpy's crew arrived in formation. They took the back booth, the throne room. It offered a clear view of the entrance and the kitchen. Bumpy sat in the corner, back against the wall. Sam took his position, standing directly behind the booth, watching the room. It was the standard formation. The bodyguard covers the blind spot. But tonight, the danger wasn't in the room. It was in the blind spot. Here is the moment, the pivot point. At 12:30 a.m., Sam's nerves were fraying. He needed a moment. He leaned down to Bumpy. "Boss, gotta hit the head. Be right back." Bumpy didn't look up. "Go ahead, Sam. Take your time." Sam walked toward the restrooms in the back. As per protocol, he took off his suit jacket, it was hot in the club, and handed it to the coat check. "Girl, a woman named Etta." "Watch this with your life, Etta," Sam said, trying to joke. Etta smiled. "Always, baby." Sam walked into the bathroom. The moment the door closed, Etta's smile vanished. Bumpy had set this stage hours ago. Etta was Bumpy's cousin. Red was a kid Bumpy had saved from a jail sentence. Red worked fast. His hands were steady. He pulled the .38 out of the holster. He swung the cylinder open, 6 bullets. He dropped them into a velvet Crown Royal bag. He snapped the cylinder shut. It spun freely now, light, empty, hollow. He wiped the gun down with a rag to remove his prints, slid it back into the holster, and hung the jacket back up. The whole operation took 45 seconds. Sam came back. He looked paler, but focused. He took his jacket from Etta. "Thanks, doll," he said. He slipped his arms into the sleeves. He felt the weight of the gun against his ribs. It felt the same. A loaded gun weighs about 20 ounces. An empty one weighs about 17. In the heat of the moment, with adrenaline pumping through your veins, you can't feel the difference of 3 ounces. Bumpy watched him put the jacket on. He watched Sam walk back to the booth. Bumpy lit a cigar. He took a long drag. He was sitting in the electric chair, and he had just short-circuited the switch. But now he had to sit there and wait for the executioner to pull the lever. The trap was set. The players were in position. The music swelled. The laughter in the room grew louder. But inside that booth, the silence was deafening. Sam's hand moved to his lapel. It was time. 1:14 a.m. The moment of truth. The Lenox Lounge is alive. The trumpet players hitting a high note, a scream of brass that cuts through the smoke. Laughter, clinking glasses, the chaotic symphony of Harlem at night. But inside the booth, the world narrows down to a single point. Sam stands directly behind Bumpy. He is breathing hard through his right nose. His heart is beating so fast it feels like a flutter in his chest. "Do it!" the voice in his head screams. "Do it and be free." Sam's hand slides into his jacket. He grips the .38 special. He draws it. Sam levels the weapon. He presses the muzzle against the soft skin behind Bumpy's ear. Bumpy stops swirling his drink. He holds his breath. This is the moment. If Red didn't do his job, if Sam reloaded, if anything went wrong, Bumpy dies right here, right now. Sam closes his eyes. He squeezes the trigger. The hammer draws back. The spring compresses. And then the firing pin strikes air. Sam's eyes snap open. Confusion floods his face. He pulls again. Panic is setting in now and again. Desperate, terrified. 3 pulls, 3 failures. The sound is unmistakable. It's the sound of a death sentence being commuted. And then, slowly, Bumpy Johnson turns around. He doesn't spin. He doesn't duck. He turns with the slow, deliberate movement of a man who has all the time in the world. He looks up at Big Sam. Sam is shaking violently now. The gun is still in his hand, pointing uselessly at Bumpy's chest. Bumpy's face isn't angry. It's almost sad. It's the look of a father watching a son fail a test he desperately wanted him to pass. Bumpy lowers the gun. "It's light, isn't it, Sam?" Bumpy whispers. His voice is low, smooth, like gravel grinding under a heavy tire. Sam can't speak. He is hyperventilating. That's because the soul is gone, Bumpy says. I took the lead out. You're trying to kill a ghost with an empty vessel. Sam said, Boss, I'm sorry. They made me. They said they'd kill me. The spell breaks. The room explodes into motion. Bumpy's other bodyguards, Goldie and Big Mike, are on him in a second. They have their pistols drawn. They drag Sam back by his collar. Goldie presses the barrel of a .45 against Sam's forehead. Say the word. Boss, Goldie snarls, just say the word and I'll paint the wall with him. Sam is weeping, a grown man, a killer, reduced to a puddle of fear. The entire club is watching. This is the moment. Blood demands blood. In the code of the streets, treason is a capital offense. Bumpy stands up. He straightens his tie. He looks down at Sam. He raises his hand. No. The word hangs in the air. No. The word hit the room harder than a bullet. In the underworld, mercy is a foreign language. If a man puts a gun to your head, you kill him. You burn his house down. That is the law of the jungle. Bumpy's men were ready. They were waiting for the nod to turn Sam into a memory. But Bumpy ignored them. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet Crown Royal bag. He upended it over the table. Clink, clink, clink. 6 hollow-point bullets rolled across the wood. Bumpy picked one up and held it in front of Sam's terrified face. He told him that these weren't just bullets. They were choices. 6 times that night, Sam had decided that Bumpy's life was worth $50,000. Bumpy's voice dropped to a whisper, but in the dead silence of the club, it carried to the back rows. He told Sam that killing him would be too easy, too quick. You don't learn anything in the grave. Instead, Bumpy passed a sentence worse than death. He told Sam he wanted him to live. He wanted him to wake up every morning for the rest of his miserable life and hear the sound of that click. He wanted him to remember that the king held his life in his hands and gave it back. Bumpy stood up and pointed to the door. He gave Sam one final order. Get out of my club. Get out of my Harlem. If I ever see your face on this island again, I won't be empty next time. Sam ran. He ran past the people he used to terrorize, stripped of his dignity, stripped of his reputation. He burst out into the rainy night, a broken man. Inside the club, the all-night. Tension finally broke. Bumpy sat back down and picked up his drink as if nothing had happened. His lieutenant Goldie leaned in and asked the question everyone was thinking. You know the Italians are going to clean him up, right, boss? Bumpy just took a sip of his drink and replied, I'm counting on it. Bumpy knew the rules better than anyone. By letting Sam live, he wasn't showing mercy. He was handing him over to the Italians. And he knew that to the Genovese family, a hitman who misses isn't a soldier. He's a liability. This was the brilliance of Bumpy Johnson. He didn't need to dirty his hands. He knew the rules of the Mafia better than they did. The Genovese family doesn't tolerate failure. A hitman who misses is a liability. A hitman who cries on the floor is an embarrassment. By letting Sam live, Bumpy wasn't showing mercy. He was handing him over to a much crueler executioner. This is one of the most debated moments in mob history. Bumpy chose psychological warfare over immediate revenge. But put yourself in that booth. Your best friend put a gun to your head for money. Would you have let him walk out of that club alive? Or would you have ended it right there? Comment yes if you'd show mercy. Comment no if he dies. Be honest. But Bumpy wasn't done. Dealing with Sam was just housekeeping. The real problem was the man who paid for the bullets, Vito Genovese. Bumpy knew he couldn't just survive the night. He had to send a message back to Little Italy. A message that said, I am not just a man, I am the city. And he decided to deliver that message in person. The sun rose over Harlem, but for Big Sam, the sun had already set. Sam ran. He hid in a flophouse in the Bronx for 3 days, but Bumpy was right. You can't outrun the organization. 2 weeks later, a fisherman in the marshes of the New Jersey Meadowlands found a body. It was Big Sam. 2 bullets in the back of the head. His hands were tied. Bumpy didn't order the hit. He didn't have to. The Genovese family cleaned up their own mess. To them, Sam was a tool that had broken on the first job, and you don't keep broken tools. But Bumpy wasn't interested in Sam. He was interested in the architects. That morning, Bumpy did something that, by all laws of the street, should have gotten him killed. He drove to the Italian Social Club on Pleasant Avenue. This was the heart of the Genovese territory. A black man walking into this club uninvited was suicide. Bumpy adjusted his tie. He walked past the lookouts on the corner. They were so shocked to see him, alive, walking tall, looking like he owned the pavement, that they didn't even reach for their guns. They just watched him pass like they were seeing a ghost. The room went silent. The card game stopped. The espresso machine hissed. Bumpy walked straight to the back table. He didn't look left or right. He walked right up to the capo who had handed Sam that envelope of cash. The capo froze, a fork halfway to his mouth, waiting for a gun. But Bumpy didn't pull a weapon. He reached into his pocket and let his hand hover over the white tablecloth. The 6 hollow-point bullets from the night before fell from his hand, hitting the table with a heavy, deliberate sound. The capo stared at them. He realized instantly what they were. These were the rounds that were supposed to be lodged in Bumpy's brain. Bumpy leaned in. He told the capo that he had dropped something. He didn't raise his voice. He simply gave them some advice. Next time they wanted to take the king, they should send a man, not a boy, and they should tell him to bring his own ammo. Then came the warning for the boss of bosses. Bumpy told him to pass a message to Vito Genovese. If Vito came for him again, Bumpy wouldn't walk in there with bullets in his pocket. He would walk in with them in his gun. Bumpy turned his back on them. It was the ultimate disrespect. He walked out of the club, slow and steady. The capo didn't move. He didn't order his men to shoot. Why? Because you don't shoot a man who walks into your house alone and disarms you with 6 bullets on a table. That isn't a gangster. That is a force of nature. Bumpy survived. He had won the battle. But the war had changed him. Before that night, Bumpy ruled with love and respect. After that night, the love was gone. He became colder, more isolated. He realized that in this life, there are no brothers. There are only employees and enemies. The trust was gone. And a king without trust is the loneliest man on earth. That night in the Lenox Lounge didn't just save a life, it defined an era. The click of that empty gun echoed all the way to the backrooms of the Mafia Commission. It forced the Genovese family to accept a hard truth. Bumpy Johnson was not a problem they could solve with violence. They realized that a war with the professor was a war they would lose, not because they lacked the firepower, but because they lacked the foresight. For the next decade, the Bumpy tax wasn't just a rule, it was the law of the land. The Italians backed off. They respected the boundaries. They learned that if you wanted to do business in Harlem, you didn't send a hitman. You sent a diplomat, and you brought a percentage. Bumpy had proven he was untouchable. He became a myth. The man who could walk through raindrops without getting wet. Big Sam's betrayal was supposed to be the end of the king. Instead, it was his coronation. By showing mercy to the traitor and defiance to the bosses, Bumpy consolidated his power in a way that fear alone never could. He showed Harlem that he was playing a game the rest of the underworld hadn't even figured out yet. He wasn't just a gangster anymore. He was the gatekeeper, and the gate was closed to anyone who didn't pay the toll. History is usually written by the victors, and in The Secret History of New York, Bumpy Johnson wrote his own chapters. He survived because he understood a truth that most men ignore. The most dangerous weapon in the room is never the gun. It is the mind that controls the gun. He didn't defeat the Italian Mafia with bullets that night. He defeated them with psychology. He defeated them by turning their own greed into a weapon against them. Big Sam is a ghost story, a warning whispered in the dark. But Bumpy Johnson? He remains the standard. That night in 1958 proved one thing. You can buy a bodyguard, you can buy a cop, and you can buy a politician. But you cannot buy the crown. The king sat on his throne, glass in hand, watching the city he conquered. And as we will see, this wasn't the last time the mob tried to take him. It was just the last time they made the mistake of underestimating him. This was just one night in the life of the Godfather of Harlem. But Bumpy Johnson fought 1,000 battles. I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? Right now? And what is the weather like in your part of the world? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more untold stories of the real Godfathers, the ones Hollywood is too scared to show you, click that subscribe button right now. We are just getting started.